So today we're tackling a huge story, the sprawling, often complicated history of the United States. It's an incredible tale about a nation born from revolution that really, in the blink of an eye, became a global superpower. But to get a real handle on where it is now, we have to go way back, even before the country itself was a thought.
And any real look into that past has to start with this number, 90%. That's the estimated percentage of the native population that was lost in the centuries after Europeans arrived. Now, conflict was definitely a part of it, but the main killer was invisible: disease. Lacking immunity to illnesses from Europe, entire civilizations were just wiped out. It's a staggering number, and it's the backdrop for absolutely everything that comes next.
So that really brings us to our big question for this explainer. How did we get from a continent filled with ancient, complex societies through this chaotic scramble for land and a devastating civil war to the United States we know today? Well, that's the journey we're about to take.
Let's start before the beginning, shall we? We're going back to a time when this land was home to an incredible array of cultures, long before the first European ships ever appeared on the horizon.
It's believed the very first people walked here from Asia over a land bridge during the last ice age. And over thousands of years, they developed into these unbelievably diverse and sophisticated societies. You had the Mississippian culture, building these enormous cities with giant earthen mounds. Out in the Southwest, the Pueblo peoples were constructing these intricate stone villages. And get this, in the Northeast, the Iroquois Confederacy created a remarkably advanced democratic government centuries before the U.S. was even an idea.
And then came 1492. It's the year everyone knows, right? Now, Vikings had landed hundreds of years earlier, but it was Christopher Columbus's arrival that really opened the floodgates for European colonization on a massive scale. His voyages kicked off a total transformation of the continent, revealing what they called the New World to Europe.
After that, it was a mad dash for the continent. The major European powers all rushed in, and they all wanted different things. Spain was all about conquest down south. The French were after riches from the fur trade up north. The Dutch set up these super profitable trading posts like New Amsterdam. And then in 1607, the English founded Jamestown, where tobacco became the engine driving their colonial dreams.
Okay, so you have all these competing colonies, often fighting with each other. How in the world did they end up joining forces in a massive rebellion? Well, this is the story of how a new nation was forged in the fire of revolution.
You know, the path to war was actually like a series of dominoes falling. It all started after the 7 Years' War, which left Great Britain with a mountain of debt. To pay it off, they started imposing taxes on the American colonies, like the Stamp Act. Well, that sparks huge protests. You've heard the slogan, "No taxation without representation." From there, things just got more and more heated. You had the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, and by that point, open rebellion was pretty much a sure thing.
Then came July 4th, 1776. This was it. The colonies made it official. The Declaration of Independence, written mostly by Thomas Jefferson, was approved. I mean, this was a radical, audacious statement to the entire world, saying these colonies were now free, independent states built on the idea of liberty.
Now, the war itself was long, it was brutal. But the real game changer, the moment everything shifted, was the American victory at the Battle of Saratoga. And here's why it was so incredibly important. It convinced a very skeptical France that the Americans could actually win this thing. And that's when France officially jumped in as an American ally.
With France's help, the Continental Army finally forced the British to surrender. The Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, and the world officially recognized this new nation. But winning the war is one thing. Building a country? That's a whole different ballgame. After a shaky first attempt at a government, the founders drafted the U.S. Constitution, a radical experiment in democracy. And in 1789, General George Washington became the first president. The United States of America was now a reality.
But independence was just the start. The 1800s would test this young nation in ways nobody could have imagined. It was expanding westward at a dizzying speed, while at the same time it was being ripped apart from the inside by the issue of slavery.
The fuel for all this expansion? It was an idea, a really powerful idea called manifest destiny. This was the widespread belief that the United States was literally destined by God to stretch from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. It was a mix of religious faith and economic ambition that was used to justify this relentless push west.
And just look at the results on this chart. It's wild.
In 1803, the Louisiana Purchase from France basically doubled the size of the country overnight. A few decades later, after the Mexican-American War, another huge chunk of land was added, including what is now California. The growth was just explosive.
But as the nation got bigger, its deepest contradiction got worse. You had two completely different worlds developing. The North was becoming an industrial powerhouse, built on free labor. Meanwhile, the South remained a farming economy that was completely dependent on the labor of millions of enslaved people. These two societies were on an unavoidable collision course.
The breaking point finally came in 1860 with the election of Abraham Lincoln. Terrified that he would end slavery, Southern states started leaving the Union, one by one. The fighting officially started when Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. The American Civil War had begun.
This was a brutal, modern war, unlike anything the world had ever seen, and its major turning point came right here, at the Battle of Gettysburg. We're talking about the single bloodiest battle of the entire conflict. It was a horrific 3-day fight that so badly weakened the Confederate Army that it never truly recovered. The momentum of the war had shifted for good.
After the absolute trauma of the Civil War, the nation was stitched back together by force. And as it rebuilt and industrialized at a shocking speed, the United States started to look beyond its own borders, transforming from a fairly isolated country into a global superpower. A journey shaped by 2 world wars.
The first half of the 20th century was just a roller coaster. You have the Spanish-American War, which announced America's arrival as an imperial power. Then it gets dragged into the trenches of World War I. That's followed by the cultural explosion of the Roaring '20s, which crashes right into the economic nightmare of the Great Depression, which is then followed by an even bigger World War.
For years, the U.S. had really tried to stay out of the Second World War. But that all changed on December 7, 1941. The Japanese Empire launched a devastating surprise attack on the naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The very next day, the United States was officially at war.
You'd think victory in World War II would bring peace, right? Well, not exactly. Instead, the world basically split in two. On one side, you had the United States and its NATO allies, all championing capitalism and democracy. And on the other, you had the Soviet Union and its allies in the Warsaw Pact, pushing communism. This kicked off the Cold War, decades of tension, proxy wars, and a nuclear standoff that defined the rest of the century. And that brings us into what you could call the modern era, a time defined by this global superpower rivalry, massive social change here at home, and the rise of new challenges that no one saw coming. The intense rivalry of the Cold War actually spurred incredible innovation, like the space race, which ended with the breathtaking Apollo 11 moon landing. At the very same time, a different battle was being fought on the streets at home, as the civil rights movement, led by people like Martin Luther King Jr., fought to end segregation. And then, the attacks of September 11, 2001 completely reshaped the nation and the world, kicking off a whole new era of global conflict. So, after this long, often chaotic journey, where is the United States today? Well, it's still a leading world power. It has the largest military, a massive economy, and it's still pushing the boundaries of science and exploration. The journey from those few fragile colonies has been messy, and it's full of the same contradictions that are still shaping the country today.
If there's one theme in the American story, it's this idea of constant and sometimes very painful reinvention. Looking back at this long, complicated history, from its incredible ideals to its deepest flaws, it really leaves us with one final, important question. What will its next chapter be?